Mafia boss wanted to know why his maid missed work, and he found her shocking life-or-death secret. Simon Greer stood in the marble foyer of his Chicago penthouse, staring at his Rolex for the 7th time in 10 minutes. 3 weeks. His housekeeper, Evangeline Vega, hadn't shown up for work in 3 weeks, and the disruption gnawed at him like a splinter he couldn't remove. In Simon's world, people didn't just vanish without explanation. They knew better. He'd built his empire on precision, on the understanding that every piece had its place, every person their role. Evangeline had always been the picture of reliability, arriving at exactly 6:47 each morning, moving through his home with quiet efficiency that he'd come to depend on more than he cared to admit. The late autumn sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the imported Italian tile. Simon ran a hand through his dark hair, his jaw clenched tight enough to ache. Something felt wrong about this absence. Evangeline wasn't the type to disappear without warning. In the 2 years she'd worked for him, she'd never been late, never called in sick, never given him a moment's concern. Her sudden silence created a void that his carefully ordered mind couldn't accept. Behind him, his second-in-command, Marcus, cleared his throat. "Boss, the meeting with the Colombians is in an hour. We need to go over the—" "Reschedule it," Simon cut him off, his voice carrying that edge of authority that made grown men freeze mid-sentence. Marcus blinked. "Reschedule? But sir, they flew in specifically—" "I don't care if they swam across the Atlantic. Reschedule it." Simon turned, his dark eyes sharp as broken glass. "I need you to find someone for me." Before we continue with this story, let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from today. Now, back to the story. Marcus knew better than to argue when Simon used that tone. "Who are we looking for?" "Evangeline Vega, my housekeeper. Last known address should be in her employment file." Simon moved to his office, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble in a rhythm that matched his racing thoughts. Something in his gut told him this wasn't a simple case of someone quitting without notice. Evangeline had always seemed careful, watchful, like someone who understood the value of staying invisible. Within 20 minutes, Marcus returned with a folder. Found her address, South Side, near Pilsen. Place called the Rosewood Apartments. Not the best neighborhood, boss. Simon was already grabbing his coat, a black cashmere piece that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Then it's a good thing I'm not most people." "You're going yourself?" Marcus couldn't hide his surprise. Simon Greer didn't make house calls. People came to him, always. "Problem with that?" "No, sir. I'll get the car ready and call the—" "Just you and me. No entourage." Simon checked the weapon holstered beneath his jacket, a habit so ingrained he barely noticed doing it anymore. "Something tells me we don't want to draw attention." The drive from his Gold Coast penthouse to the South Side took 40 minutes through Chicago's congested streets. Simon watched the cityscape change outside his tinted windows, luxury giving way to struggle, gleaming towers replaced by worn brownstones and struggling businesses. This was the Chicago most people knew, the one that existed far from his climate-controlled world of power and privilege. The Rosewood Apartments looked exactly like their name suggested they might have been accurate 50 years ago. Now the building sagged with age and neglect, its brick facade stained with decades of city grime. A group of teenagers scattered as Simon's Mercedes pulled up, recognizing expensive trouble when they saw it. "Want me to come up?" Marcus asked, his hand resting on his own weapon. Simon studied the building, noting the broken security door, the flickering hallway light visible through the grimy glass. "Stay with the car. Keep your phone on." The stairwell reeked of old cooking smells and something else Simon couldn't quite identify. Desperation, maybe. Apartment 4C sat at the end of a dim hallway where the carpet had worn through to concrete in spots. He knocked, 3 sharp raps that echoed in the enclosed space. Nothing. He knocked again, harder this time. "Evangeline, it's Simon Greer." A door cracked open down the hall, an elderly woman's suspicious face peering out. "She ain't there." Simon turned, softening his expression into something less predatory. "Do you know where I can find her?" The woman's eyes narrowed, taking in his expensive quote, the way he carried himself. "You a cop?" "No, ma'am. I'm her employer. I'm worried about her." Something in his tone must have rung true because the woman opened her door a bit wider. "Hospital, Cook County. Been there about 3 weeks now. Ambulance came for her middle of the night. Heard the sirens myself." Simon's blood ran cold. "Which hospital?" "Cook County, like I said. The big one." "She did. You really her boss? She ever mentioned working for someone in the Gold Coast?" "She's very private about her work," Simon said carefully. Was she having problems? Did anyone bother her?" The old woman's face closed off immediately. "I mind my business. You should maybe do the same." But Simon had caught something in her expression, a flicker of fear that told him more than words could. Someone had bothered Evangeline. Someone who'd put her in the hospital. Back in the car, Marcus took one look at his face and started driving without being told their destination. "Hospital? It's Cook County." Simon pulled out his phone, already making calls. Within minutes, he'd learned what floor, what room, what condition. The efficiency of money and power, cutting through red tape like a hot knife through butter. Cook County Hospital sprawled across Chicago's near west side, a massive complex that treated everyone from gunshot victims to babies being born to mothers who had nowhere else to go. Simon hated hospitals. They smelled of antiseptic trying to mask death, of good intentions falling short of need. The emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos as Simon and Marcus pushed through to the elevators. 4th floor, room 412. The nurse at the station looked up as they approached, her tired eyes taking in Simon's expensive clothes with the practiced assessment of someone who'd seen every type of person Chicago had to offer.
"I'm here to see Evangeline Vega," Simon said, his voice carrying that tone that expected compliance. The nurse glanced at her computer. "Family only. I'm her employer. I've been trying to reach her for weeks. Still, family only." The nurse's expression didn't budge. "HIPAA regulations. I can't even confirm we have a patient by that name." Simon leaned against the desk, lowering his voice. "Listen, I understand you have rules, but I'm worried about her. She's been missing from work and I just want to make sure she's okay. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." The nurse studied him, her bullshit detector clearly finely tuned from years of dealing with every type of person imaginable. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied her, because she sighed. "Room 412. But if anyone asks, you're her brother." And 5 minutes means 5 minutes. The door to room 412 stood slightly ajar. Simon pushed it open slowly, not sure what he'd find on the other side. The room was small, sterile, dominated by a single bed where a figure lay connected to various monitors and IV lines. For a moment, he almost didn't recognize her. Evangeline Vega had always been a woman who carried herself with quiet dignity, despite the humble nature of her work. She kept her dark hair neatly pinned back, moved with efficient grace through his home, and maintained an invisible boundary between employee and employer that Simon had never thought to cross. The woman in the hospital bed looked like a shadow of that person. Her face bore the fading yellow-green remnants of bruises, one eye still slightly swollen. Her left arm was in a cast, and the way she lay suggested injuries Simon couldn't see beneath the thin hospital blanket. But it was her eyes that struck me most when they fluttered open at the sound of his entrance. They held the wariness of prey that had learned predators came in all forms. "Mr. Greer?" Her voice came out raspy, confused. She tried to sit up, wincing with the movement. "Don't." Simon moved closer, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Don't try to move. I'm not here to... I just wanted to know why you hadn't come to work." A bitter laugh escaped her cracked lips, immediately followed by a wince of pain. "You came all the way here because I missed work?" "You've never missed work. Not once in 2 years. Simon pulled up the visitor's chair, sitting down so he wasn't looming over her. What happened, Evangeline? Her eyes darted to the door, then back to him, calculating. It's nothing. Just an accident. Don't lie to me. The words came out harder than he intended. I've seen enough injuries to know the difference between an accident and someone's fists. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them back with fierce determination. It doesn't matter. I'll be fine. I'll be back to work as soon as the doctor clears me. The hell you will. Simon leaned forward, keeping his voice low but intense. Tell me who did this. Why? The question came out sharp, defensive. So you can feel good about being concerned for the help? So you can assuage whatever guilt made you drive down here? The accusation stung because part of it was true, but only part. Because no one who works for me gets hurt without consequences. Because you've been in my home taking care of my space for 2 years, and I don't even know if you have family, if you have help, if you have anyone. I ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with himself as much as the situation. Because I'm realizing I should have noticed something was wrong long before you ended up here. Evangeline stared at him, and Simon watched the internal battle play across her face. Fear versus hope, self-preservation versus desperate need. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. My ex-boyfriend, Diego Daniels. She closed her eyes as if saying the name physically pained her. We broke up 4 months ago. He didn't take it well. Did he do this? Simon gestured to her injuries, his voice deadly calm despite the rage building in his chest. This time, yes. He came to my apartment 3 weeks ago, drunk and angry because I wouldn't take him back. When I tried to call the police, She trailed off, her good hand clutching the blanket. I don't remember much after that. My neighbor called 911. Did you file a report? What's the point? Bitterness colored her words. He'll get arrested, maybe spend a night in jail, then he'll be back out and even angrier. The system doesn't protect people like me, Mr. Greer. It just gives them more reasons to come back. Simon stood, pulling out his phone. Give me a minute. He stepped into the hallway where Marcus waited, his expression grim. One quick phone call to his lawyer, another to a contact in the Chicago PD, a third to someone whose job description didn't exist on any official payroll. By the time he returned to Evangeline's room 5 minutes later, wheels were already in motion. Here's what's going to happen, Simon said, his tone leaving no room for argument. You're being transferred to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Private room, best doctors, full security. My people will handle the transfer within the hour. I can't afford. You're not paying for it. I am. He held up a hand when she started to protest. Consider it workers' compensation for the time you've missed. When you're released, you're not going back to that apartment. I own a building in Lincoln Park with a vacant unit. It's yours rent-free until you get back on your feet. Evangeline's eyes had gone wide. Mr. Greer, I can't accept.
You can, and you will. Because while you're recovering, I'm going to make sure Diego Daniels understands that you're under my protection now. Simon's voice dropped into a register that had made hardened criminals reconsider their life choices. And no one touches what's mine. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Simon was only beginning to understand himself. Evangeline Vega wasn't just his housekeeper anymore. The moment he'd seen her lying in that hospital bed, something had shifted in his carefully ordered world. She'd become something else, someone worth protecting, someone who made him feel something other than the cold calculation that usually governed his decisions. Why? Evangeline whispered. Why would you do all this for me? Simon looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the bruises and the hospital gown to the woman who'd moved through his life with quiet strength for 2 years.
because you deserve better than this. Because I can help, and I'm choosing to, and because—" He paused, surprising himself with the honesty that wanted to surface. "Because for some reason I don't fully understand yet, the thought of you being hurt makes me want to burn down the whole city to find the person responsible." A nurse bustled in, breaking the moment. "Visiting hours are—" "She's being transferred," Simon cut in smoothly. "Northwestern Memorial. Everything's been arranged. Someone from their transport team will be here within the hour to handle the move." The nurse looked between them, clearly confused, but recognizing the tone of someone who'd already made decisions that weren't going to be unmade. "I'll need to check with the—" "It's already been approved by your administration." Simon handed her a card. "Any questions? Call this number. They'll confirm everything." After the nurse left, looking flustered, Evangeline spoke again. "I don't understand why you're doing this." "Maybe I don't either, not completely. But I do know that Diego Daniels is going to wish he'd never laid a hand on you. That I understand perfectly." "Don't hurt him," Evangeline said quickly, fear flashing across her face. "Please, Mr. Greer. If you hurt him, it'll just make everything worse." Simon turned back, his expression unreadable. "I'm not going to hurt him, Evangeline. I'm simply going to have a conversation, make sure he understands the new reality of his situation, which is that you're off limits, permanently." He pulled out a business card, setting it on her bedside table. "This is my personal number. You call me if you need anything, day or night, and I mean anything." As Simon left the hospital, Marcus falling into step beside him, the pieces of a plan were already forming in his mind. Diego Daniels had no idea what kind of hornet's nest he'd kicked. Men like him operated in a world where consequences came slow, or not at all, where the system's failures gave them permission to keep hurting the vulnerable. But Simon Greer existed outside the system. He was the consequence the system couldn't deliver. "Boss," Marcus ventured as they reached the car, "what's the play here?" "Find Diego Daniels. I want to know where he works, where he drinks, where he sleeps. I want to know what he cares about and who he's afraid of." Simon slid into the back seat, his mind already working through scenarios. "And Marcus, do it quietly. No word gets back to him that we're looking. I want this to be a surprise." "You got it." Marcus paused. "The woman, Evangeline, she's someone special to you?" The question caught Simon off guard. Was she? 24 hours ago, he would have said no. She was just his housekeeper, reliable and forgettable. But seeing her in that hospital bed, seeing the evidence of violence written across her body, had triggered something in him he didn't fully recognize. A protective instinct that went beyond employer responsibility. A rage on her behalf that felt personal in a way that didn't quite make sense yet. "I don't know," Simon admitted, the honesty surprising him. "But I'm going to find out." Act 2. 3 days later, Evangeline lay in her private room at Northwestern Memorial, still struggling to accept the drastic changes in her circumstances. The room was larger than her entire apartment in the Rosewood building, with windows overlooking Lake Michigan and enough space for a couch, chairs, and even a small table. The TV was massive, the bathroom pristine, and the nurses treated her with a level of care and respect she'd never experienced in any medical setting. But none of that comfort could quiet the anxiety that churned in her stomach. Simon Greer hadn't visited since that first day at Cook County, though flowers arrived daily with cards that simply said, "Healing takes time. S.G." The gifts were thoughtful, expensive, and made her increasingly uneasy about what she might owe in return. Men like Simon Greer don't give without expecting something back. Evangeline had learned that lesson long ago. A knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting another nurse with medication or a meal. Instead, Simon stepped through the door, and Evangeline was struck again by how out of place he looked in the hospital setting. He wore dark jeans and a charcoal sweater today, more casual than the suit from their last meeting, but still radiating that aura of power and danger that made people instinctively move out of his way. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling into one of the visitors' chairs without waiting for permission. "Better. The doctors say I can probably leave in a few days." Evangeline adjusted her position, trying to look more composed than she felt. "Mr. Greer, about everything you've done." "Simon," he interrupted, "if I'm paying your hospital bills, you can at least call me Simon." Despite herself, a small smile tugged at her lips. "Simon, then, I need to know what this is going to cost me." His expression darkened. "You think I'm doing this to leverage something from you? Men don't help without reason, especially men like you." She met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away despite her nervousness. "So what is it you want? Because I need to know before I accept any more of your generosity." He leaned back, studying her with those sharp, dark eyes that seemed to see more than she wanted to reveal. "You're right. I do want something." Her heart sank even as part of her had expected this confirmation. "What?" "I want you to accept my help without attaching strings to it that don't exist." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "I want you to stop assuming the worst of me because of what you think you know about who I am. And I want you to understand that sometimes, Evangeline, people help because they can, and because it's the right thing to do." She blinked, not expecting that answer. "You're not known for doing the right thing, Mr. Simon." A harsh laugh escaped him. "Fair point. But maybe you don't know me as well as you think you do. I've worked in your home for 2 years. I've seen the men who visit. I've heard phone conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. I've cleaned offices where papers were left out that told stories about who you are and what you do." Evangeline's voice remained steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. "I know exactly who you are. And yet you kept working for me. Why?" The question wasn't accusatory, just curious. "Because the job paid well, and you never made me feel unsafe. Because whatever you are outside your home, inside it, you were just a man who worked too much and forgot to eat lunch." She paused, gathering courage. "And because I needed the money too desperately to have principles about where it came from."
"Honest," Simon observed. "I appreciate that. You asked why I kept working for you. Why did you keep employing me? There are plenty of housekeepers in Chicago." Simon was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the window where Lake Michigan stretched gray and cold under October clouds. "You were different. Professional, yes. Efficient, absolutely. But there was something else. You moved through my space without trying to become part of it. You never asked questions, never gossiped, never tried to ingratiate yourself." He turned back to her. "You treated the job like it was just a job. That kind of discretion is rare and valuable." "Is that why you're doing all this? To keep me discreet?" "I'm doing this because seeing you beaten half to death in a county hospital bed made me furious. I'm doing this because you deserve better than what you've been given. And yes," he admitted, "I'm doing this because somewhere in the last 2 years, you became more than just my housekeeper, even if I didn't realize it until now." The admission hung between them, heavy with implications neither seemed ready to fully explore. Evangeline felt her breath catch, unsure how to respond to this unexpected vulnerability from a man whose reputation was built on being invulnerable. "I found Diego," Simon said, shifting the conversation to safer ground. "He's been staying with his brother in Bridgeport, working construction jobs off the books. Has a habit of drinking at a bar called Murphy's on 31st Street most nights after work." Cold fear washed over Evangeline. "What are you going to do?" "Have a conversation. Make sure he understands that you're off limits now." "Simon, please, if you hurt him, he'll..." "He'll what?" Simon's voice went cold. Come after you again? Let me be clear, Evangeline, that's not going to happen. Whether you accept my help or not, whether you ever work for me again or not, Diego Daniels is not going to hurt you or any other woman ever again. You can't just... She struggled to find the right words. You can't solve everything with violence and intimidation? Can't I? He leaned forward, his intensity almost physical in its force. The system failed you. The police, the courts, all the official channels that are supposed to protect people like you from people like him, they failed. So yes, I absolutely can solve this with the tools I have available. And I will. Then you're no better than he is. The words came out harsher than she intended, and she watched Simon's face close off, becoming the cold mask she'd seen him wear around his business associates. He stood, moving toward the door. Maybe I'm not, he said quietly, but at least when I hurt people, they deserve it. Simon, wait! Evangeline struggled to sit up more fully, her body protesting the movement. I'm sorry. That wasn't fair. He paused, hand on the door handle, but didn't turn around. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice small. I'm scared of what happens if you confront him. I'm scared of owing you for all of this. I'm scared of what it means that you're involving yourself in my life. I'm scared of everything right now. Simon turned back then, his expression softening. He returned to her bedside, and before Evangeline could process what was happening, he'd taken her good hand in both of his. The touch was gentle, reverent almost, and sent warmth spreading up her arm. I know you're scared. You'd be stupid not to be, and you're not stupid. His thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture oddly intimate. But I'm not going to hurt you, and I'm not going to let anyone else hurt you either. You can't promise that. You can't control everything. Watch me. The words should have sounded arrogant, but instead they carried the weight of absolute conviction. I'm going to handle Diego, you're going to recover, and then we're going to figure out what comes next. In that order. What if I say no? What if I tell you to stay away from him, to stop interfering in my life? Simon's expression grew thoughtful. Then I'd probably ignore you and do it anyway, because some things are bigger than what you want or what I want. This is about what's right. He squeezed her hand gently. But I'd prefer to have your blessing. Evangeline looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast between his expensive watch and her hospital bracelet, between his manicured nails and her own chipped polish. They existed in different worlds, and yet here he was, holding her hand like it was something precious. Why does this matter so much to you? She whispered. I don't know, Simon admitted. I've been asking myself the same question. All I know is that from the moment I saw you in that hospital bed, something changed. You stopped being just my housekeeper and became someone I need to protect. Someone I want to protect. That's not a good enough reason to risk whatever you're planning to risk. Maybe not, but it's the only one I have. He released her hand, stepping back. Get some rest. Your doctor says you're healing well, but you need time. The apartment in Lincoln Park is ready whenever you're released. I had some of your things brought over from the Rosewood. You went through my apartment? Evangeline felt a flash of violation. My people did, with your landlord's permission. Just clothes, toiletries, personal items. Nothing invasive. He pulled an envelope from his pocket, setting it on the bedside table. Keys to the new place. Address is written on the envelope. The building has 24-hour security, and I've made sure they know to be extra vigilant about who they let in. Simon. No arguments. Not about this. His tone brooked no disagreement. You're moving into that apartment, you're taking time to heal, and you're accepting my help, because right now you don't have better options. The blunt honesty of that last statement stung because it was true. Evangeline had no family in Chicago, few friends, and even fewer resources. Her savings had been depleted by medical bills from previous accidents Diego had caused. She was, in every practical sense, trapped in a situation where Simon's help was the only lifeline available. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. Something flickered in Simon's expression. satisfaction maybe, or relief. I'll check on you tomorrow. Call if you need anything before then. After he left, Evangeline lay back against the pillows, her mind churning. Simon Greer was a dangerous man who lived in a dangerous world. Getting tangled up with him would likely lead to complications she couldn't even imagine yet, but he'd also shown her more kindness in the past few days than anyone had in years. He'd seen her at her lowest and hadn't looked away or judged her. He'd offered help without demanding anything tangible in return. She wanted to believe his motives were pure, that he was simply a good man beneath the criminal exterior, but Evangeline had learned the hard way that wanting to believe something didn't make it true. Men like Simon Greer always had angles, always played games within games. The question was, what game was he playing with her, and what would it cost her when she finally figured it out?
Murphy's Tavern squatted on the corner of 31st and Halstead like a monument to blue-collar Chicago. The neon sign in the window flickered erratically, advertising Budweiser in letters that had seen better decades. Inside, the bar smelled of stale beer, fried food, and the accumulated sweat of men who worked with their hands and drank to forget. Diego Daniels sat at the far end of the bar, hunched over his fourth whiskey of the evening. He was a big man, broad-shouldered from years of construction work, with hands that could crush concrete but had chosen softer targets. His face bore the weathered look of someone who'd lived hard and planned to die the same way. Simon pushed through the door at exactly 8:47 p.m., Marcus trailing behind him. The bar's conversation didn't exactly stop, but it definitely paused as the regulars registered the presence of men who clearly didn't belong in their neighborhood watering hole. Simon's cashmere coat alone probably cost more than the bar's monthly liquor order. He'd made a point of coming alone, except for Marcus. No entourage of armed men, no obvious display of force. This wasn't about intimidation through numbers. This was personal. Diego Daniels. Simon's voice cut through the bar's ambient noise. Diego turned slowly, his eyes already glazed from alcohol. Who's asking? Someone you've inconvenienced. Simon slid onto the bar stool next to him, uninvited. Buy you a drink? I got a drink. Diego gestured at his whiskey with the belligerence of a man who'd spent his life looking for fights. Then buy me one. We need to talk. Diego's eyes narrowed, studying Simon with the calculating gaze of someone who'd learned to assess threats through painful experience. I don't know you, but I know you. I know you work construction, mostly under the table because you can't pass a background check. I know you live with your brother in a 3-bedroom ranch on 38th Street. I know you drink here 4 nights a week, usually until closing. Simon's voice remained conversational, almost friendly. And I know you put your ex-girlfriend in the hospital 3 weeks ago. Diego's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, anger, calculation, then a sort of defensive defiance. That bitch say something to you? Whatever she told you, she's lying. She fell down the... Simon's hand shot out, gripping Diego's wrist with enough force to make the bigger men grunt in pain. Don't. Don't insult both our intelligence by lying. Who the hell are you? Diego tried to pull his arm back, but Simon's grip didn't budge. I am the man who's going to explain your new reality. Simon released him, taking a casual sip of the whiskey the nervous bartender had slid in front of him. Evangeline Vega is under my protection now. That means you don't call her, don't text her, don't drive by her place, don't even think about her. She's off limits. Permanently. Diego rubbed his wrist, anger flushing his face red. And who the hell are you to tell me what to do? She's my girl. She was never your girl. She was your victim. And now she's done being either. Fuck you! Diego stood, his size advantage apparent now. He had 4 inches and 40 pounds on Simon. He swung then, a haymaker that would have taken Simon's head off if it had connected. But Simon had been in more fights than Diego could imagine, against men far more dangerous. He ducked under the wild punch, drove his elbow into Diego's solar plexus, then swept his legs out from under him in one fluid motion. Diego crashed to the floor, the wind knocked out of his flesh.
The bar had gone completely silent now. Every patron froze in mid-drink as they watched the well-dressed stranger dismantle their regular without breaking a sweat. Simon crouched down, his face inches from Diego's. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay away from Evangeline. You're going to move out of Chicago. I don't care where you go. Milwaukee, Indianapolis, fucking Anchorage. But you're going to leave the city within a week. You can't, Diego wheezed, still trying to catch his breath. I can. I am. Because if you don't, if I hear you've been anywhere near her, if you've made any attempt to contact her, I'm going to make you disappear. Not metaphorically, literally. You'll vanish, and no one will ever find enough pieces to bury. He stood, pulling an envelope from his pocket and dropping it on Diego's chest. There's $5,000 in there. That's your moving bonus. Use it to start over somewhere else. Consider it the cheapest way out of the situation you've created. Diego managed to prop himself up on his elbows, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. Who the hell are you? Simon Greer. He let the name hang in the air, watching recognition and fear bloom in Diego's eyes. Even men who didn't run in criminal circles knew that name, knew the reputation that came with it. Now, do we understand each other?
Diego nodded slowly, his earlier defiance completely evaporated. Good. You have 7 days. After that, I stop being reasonable. Simon turned to the bartender. Drinks are on me tonight. Whatever anyone wants. He dropped several $100 bills on the bar. Consider it an apology for the disruption. As Simon and Marcus left the bar, Marcus finally spoke. That was almost civilized. I'm evolving, Simon said dryly. Besides, killing him would have been messy and raised questions I don't feel like answering right now. You think he'll actually leave? Simon considered the question as they reached the car. Yes. Men like Diego are fundamentally cowards. They prey on people who can't fight back. Now that he knows there are consequences, real consequences, he'll run. And if he doesn't, then I'll handle it. But I don't think it will come to that. Simon slid into the back seat, his mind already moving to his next concern. How's the apartment setup coming? All done. Security systems installed, cameras at all entrances. The team knows to keep an eye on things but stay invisible. Miss Vega won't even know they're there unless something happens. Good. Simon pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. Nothing from Evangeline, which either meant she was resting or still processing everything. He'd expected her to push back harder against his help, but her acceptance suggested just how desperate her situation had been. The thought of her living in fear, dealing with Diego's violence alone, made him angry all over again. How had he not noticed? 2 years she'd worked for him, and he'd been so wrapped up in his own world that he'd never seen the signs. The way she sometimes flinched at sudden movements, the careful makeup that probably hid bruises, the guardedness in her eyes whenever she talked about her personal life. Boss? Marcus's voice pulled him from his thoughts. You okay? Fine. Just thinking. About Miss Vega? Simon shot him a look. What's your point? No point. Just, I've worked for you for 8 years. Never seen you take a personal interest in anyone like this before. She's an employee who was in trouble. I helped. End of story. Marcus wisely didn't argue, but his skeptical silence spoke volumes. Simon couldn't blame him. The truth is, he didn't fully understand his own reactions either. Yes, Evangeline had worked for him. Yes, he felt some responsibility for her well-being. But this went beyond employer obligation. When he'd seen her in that hospital bed, something primitive had awakened in him, a need to protect, to claim, to ensure that nothing ever hurt her again. It was possessive, and probably unhealthy, and completely at odds with the careful distance he maintained from everyone in his life. But understanding it and controlling it were two different things. Right now, he wasn't even sure he wanted to control it. Back at his penthouse, Simon stood at his usual spot by the windows, looking out at Chicago's glittering skyline. His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. Greer. Mr. Greer? The voice was female, young, uncertain. This is Isabella Evans. I'm Evangeline's neighbor from the Rosewood. Simon's attention sharpened. Is everything all right? I don't know. Maybe. I just thought you should know that Diego came by the building tonight. He was banging on Evangeline's door, yelling about how he knows she's got some rich guy protecting her now, how she's going to regret making him look bad. Ice flooded Simon's veins. When was this? About 20 minutes ago. I called the cops, but by the time they showed up, he'd left. They said without him actually breaking in, there wasn't much they could do. Frustration colored her voice, useless as always. Thank you for calling. Evangeline isn't at that apartment anymore, but I appreciate you looking out for her. Where is she? Is she okay? She's safe. That's all that matters. Simon was already texting Marcus as he was talking. If Diego comes back, don't engage with him. Call me at this number immediately. After ending the call, Simon stood motionless for a long moment, letting the cold rage settle into something useful. Diego had gone to Evangeline's apartment after their conversation. That was bold, stupid, or both. It also meant he was angry enough to be unpredictable, which made him more dangerous. Simon had given him a week to leave Chicago. Clearly, that had been too generous. His phone buzzed with Marcus's response. Team already moving, tracking Diego now. Good, because the time for civilized warnings had passed. Diego had made his choice, and now Simon would make his. Evangeline was released from Northwestern Memorial on a Friday morning, 6 days after Simon's visit to Murphy's Tavern. The apartment in Lincoln Park exceeded every expectation she had tried to keep in check. The building was a converted brownstone on a tree-lined street where BMWs and Mercedes parked at meters without fear. The lobby had marble floors and a doorman named Robert who greeted her by name. The apartment itself was on the 3rd floor, a one-bedroom with hardwood floors, updated kitchen, and windows that flooded the space with natural light. Her few belongings looked lost in all that space, her second-hand furniture from the Rosewood apartment having been judged too damaged to move. Everything was cleaned and inspected before being brought over. The building manager, a woman named Evie Lane, explained as she walked Evangeline through the space. Mr. Greer was very specific about ensuring you had everything you needed. He's been generous, Evangeline said carefully, still trying to process the magnitude of the change in her circumstances. He's a good man to have looking out for you, Evie said, her expression suggesting she knew exactly who Simon Greer was and what that meant. The security system is state-of-the-art. Cameras at all entrances, panic button by the bed and in the bathroom. We also have 24-hour doormen and a security team that does regular rounds. After Evie left, Evangeline explored her new home slowly, running her fingers along countertops that gleamed, opening cabinets that had been stocked with basic supplies. The refrigerator contained fresh food. The bathroom held expensive toiletries. The bedroom closet showed new clothes in her size, hanging alongside her own worn pieces. It felt like a dream, the kind she'd wake up to find herself back in the Rosewood with Diego pounding on her door. Her phone rang, Simon's number. Hello? You're home? His voice carried that note of satisfaction she was learning to recognize. If you can call it that. Simon, this is too much. It's exactly enough. Do you like it? Evangeline looked around the sun-filled living room at the life that seemed to be offering itself to her. It's beautiful, but I don't know how I'll ever repay you for all of this.
I don't want repayment. I want you safe and comfortable while you heal. There's something you should know. Diego hasn't left Chicago. Her blood went cold. What? He went to your old apartment last week. Your neighbor, Isabella, called me. Don't worry, Simon added quickly, hearing her sharp intake of breath. He doesn't know where you are now, and he won't find out. Simon, what did you do? Evangeline sank onto the couch, her legs suddenly weak. I had a conversation with him. Made it clear you're under my protection. He didn't take the hint seriously enough. That's being corrected. What does that mean? It means you don't have to worry about him anymore. It means you're safe. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm giving you right now. His tone softened. Evangeline, trust me, please. I know that's asking a lot, but I need you to trust that I'm handling this in a way that protects you. She wanted to demand details, to know exactly what handling this entailed. But part of her recognized that she didn't really want to know. She wanted the outcome, safety, freedom from fear without the burden of knowing what it cost. Okay, she whispered. Okay? I trust you. God help me, but I do. The silence on the other end of the line felt heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Simon spoke again, his voice rougher than before. I'm coming by tonight. I want to see for myself that you're settling in all right. You don't have to. I want to. Is that okay? The question surprised her. Simon Greer didn't usually ask permission for anything. Yes, that's... Yes. 7 o'clock. I'll bring dinner. After they hung up, Evangeline sat in the quiet of her new apartment, trying to sort through the tangle of emotions twisting in her chest. Fear, yes. Gratitude, absolutely. But also something else. Something she was afraid to name, because naming it would make it real. Simon Greer was dangerous, powerful, and operated in a world where violence was currency. Getting involved with him beyond the employer-employee relationship they'd maintained would be foolish, reckless, potentially catastrophic. But when he held her hand in the hospital, when his voice went soft saying her name, when he promised to keep her safe with such absolute conviction, in those moments she had felt something shift inside her, a want she had no business wanting, a hope she shouldn't allow herself to feel. The day passed slowly. Evangeline unpacked her few belongings, took a long bath in the deep tub, and tried not to watch the clock. At 6:30, she found herself changing clothes 3 times, ultimately settling on jeans and a soft sweater that didn't look like she was trying too hard, while also not looking like she didn't care. At exactly 7 o'clock, the intercom buzzed. Robert's voice crackled through. Miss Vega, Mr. Greer is here to see you. Send him up, please. She opened the door before Simon could knock, finding him standing in the hallway with bags from Lou Malnati's, the famous Chicago pizzeria. He wore dark jeans and a navy Henley, more casual than she'd ever seen him except at the hospital. Deep dish, he said, holding up the bags. I realized I have no idea if you even like pizza, but I figured everyone likes Lou Malnati's. I love pizza. Evangeline stepped back to let him in, hyper-aware of how his presence seemed to fill the space. This is really nice of you. Simon set the bags on the kitchen counter, taking in the apartment with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. You're settling in okay? It's an adjustment. Everything's so much more. She gestured vaguely at the spacious rooms. I keep waiting for someone to tell me there's been a mistake. No mistake. He started pulling out pizza boxes, plates, and napkins. You deserve this, Evangeline. You deserve to live without fear, in a space that's safe and comfortable. Because I work for you? Simon paused, meeting her eyes. No, because you're you. The simple statement carried more weight than a flowery declaration. Evangeline felt heat rise in her cheeks, suddenly unsure how to respond. Simon seemed to sense her discomfort, shifting back to the safer territory of food. They ate at her small dining table, the meal surprisingly comfortable, despite the underlying tension neither was acknowledging. Simon asked about her recovery, and she found herself talking about physical therapy, about the doctor's predictions for her healing timeline, about the small victories of being able to move without pain. What about work? Evangeline finally asked. I know I can't do the physical cleaning yet, but maybe in a few weeks? Take all the time you need. Your job will be waiting whenever you're ready.
I can't just not work indefinitely. I need to pay bills, buy groceries. The apartment's rent-free, and I had Evie set up an account for you at the grocery store downstairs. Everything's covered." Evangeline set down her pizza slice. "Simon, I can't let you keep paying for everything." "Why not?" "Because it's too much. Because I can't owe you this much without understanding what you expect in return." The words burst out louder than she had intended, echoing in the quiet apartment. Simon went very still, his expression unreadable. "What do I expect in return?" he repeated slowly. "You think this is some kind of transaction? Isn't it? Men like you don't give without taking. There's always an angle, always a price." Evangeline felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. "So just tell me what it is. Tell me what you want from me so I know what I'm dealing with." Simon stood up, moving around the table to where she sat. He crouched down so they were eye level, his hands resting on the arms of her chair, but not touching her. "I want you safe. I want you healthy. I want you to have a life where you don't flinch at sudden noises or sleep with one eye open." His voice was intense, but gentle. "That's what I want, Evangeline. Nothing more, nothing less." "I don't believe you." "Then let me be clearer." He reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture so tender that it made her breath catch. "I want you safe, because seeing you hurt made me feel things I don't normally feel. I want you healthy because I care about you in a way that goes beyond employer-employee. I want you to have a good life because somewhere in the past 2 years, you became important to me, and I didn't even realize it until you were gone." Evangeline stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Simon."
You don't have to say anything. You don't have to feel the same way. But I need you to understand that this, he gestured at the apartment, at everything he'd done, isn't about leverage or ownership. It's about taking care of someone who matters. "Why?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "Why do I matter?" Simon's smile was rueful. "I'm still figuring that out myself, but I know that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the moment I realized you were gone. I know that the thought of you being hurt makes me want to destroy everything and everyone who allowed it to happen. I know that right now, sitting here with you, is the most at peace I've felt in longer than I can remember." Evangeline's hand moved of its own accord, touching his face. Simon's eyes closed briefly at the contact, leaning into her palm. "This is crazy," she murmured. "You're you and I'm me, and this can't possibly work." "Probably not," he agreed, opening his eyes. "But I'd like to try anyway, if you're willing." "I don't even know what this is. What are you asking for?" "Time. A chance. Permission to keep caring about what happens to you." His hand came up to cover hers where it rested on his cheek. "I'm not expecting anything physical, anything romantic, anything beyond what you're comfortable giving. I just want a chance to see where this goes." Evangeline knew this was a terrible idea. Simon Greer was dangerous, complicated, involved in things that could destroy her. But he was also the first man in years who'd made her feel truly seen, truly protected, truly valued. He'd quite literally saved her life, and now he was offering her something she'd thought she'd never have again: hope. "Okay," she whispered. "We can try." The smile that broke across Simon's face transformed him, making him look younger, lighter, almost boyish. "Yeah? Yeah, but Simon, I need you to be honest with me about Diego, about what you did or are going to do. I can't be in the dark about things that affect my safety." His expression sobered. "Diego left Chicago yesterday morning. My people followed him all the way to Indianapolis, where he checked into a motel. He's gone, Evangeline. He won't bother you again." "You didn't hurt him?" "I didn't have to. Sometimes the threat of consequences is enough." He stood, pulling her up with him. "But I need you to know, if he ever comes back, if he ever tries to hurt you again,
I will do whatever is necessary to keep you safe. Can you accept that?" Evangeline thought about it, really thought about it. Could she accept being with a man who would use violence to protect her? Could she reconcile her principles with the reality of who Simon was? But then she remembered lying in that hospital bed, broken and afraid, with no one to turn to. She remembered years of fear, of careful movements designed to not trigger Diego's rage, of being completely alone in her terror. And she remembered Simon's hand holding hers and his voice promising she'd never have to be afraid again. "Yes," she said finally, "I can accept that." 3 months later, winter had settled over Chicago with the kind of cold that made the lake freeze at its edges and turned the city into a study in gray and white. Evangeline stood in Simon's penthouse, their penthouse now, though she still had trouble thinking of it that way, watching snow fall past the windows. So much had changed. She'd gone back to work for Simon, but the relationship had evolved into something neither of them had quite found words for. She still handled his household, but she also sat in on some of his business meetings, offered opinions he actually listened to, and gradually became a fixture in his life that went far beyond employee. They hadn't slept together. That line remained uncrossed by mutual, unspoken agreement. But they did dinner together most nights, talked for hours about everything and nothing, and slowly built something that felt real and solid and terrifying in its potential. "You're thinking too loud," Simon said from behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. This had become familiar too, the casual touches that spoke of comfort and affection. "Just remembering," Evangeline leaned back against him. 3 months ago, I was in a hospital bed wondering if I'd survive. Now, I'm here." "Any regrets?" She turned in his arms to face him. "None. You?" "Only that I didn't realize what you meant to me sooner." His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. "I wasted 2 years being blind. You were focused on your work. I understood that. I was hiding behind my work, using it as an excuse to not feel anything, not to let anyone get close. And then you were gone, and suddenly all that control I thought I had didn't mean anything." Evangeline smiled, reaching up to loosen his tie. He'd just come home from a meeting, still wearing the armor of his business persona. "And now? Now I'm learning that losing control isn't always a bad thing." He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Evangeline, I need to tell you something." The serious tone made her nervous. "What is it?" "Diego's back in Chicago." Fear spiked through her, instant and visceral. "What? When?" "2 days ago, my people spotted him in Bridgeport, staying with his brother again." Simon's arms tightened around her. "Before you panic, you need to know that he's not here for you. He's been careful to stay away from your old neighborhood, away from anywhere you might be. He got a job, seems to be trying to straighten out his life. Then why tell me?" Evangeline's heart still raced, but Simon's calm confidence helped ground her. "Because I promised to be honest with you about things that affect your safety, and because I want you to decide what happens next." She pulled back to look at him fully. "What do you mean?" Simon led her to the couch, sitting down and pulling her next to him. "I can make him leave again. 1 word, and he's gone, permanently if necessary. Or," he paused, "we can let him be. Let him try to rebuild his life here, as long as he stays away from you. Your choice." Evangeline sat with that, really considering it. 3 months ago, she would have begged Simon to make Diego disappear, to eliminate the threat entirely. But now, having built a new life, having felt truly safe for the first time in years, she realized the power Diego had held over her had diminished. "Let him be," she said finally. "Unless he becomes a threat, just let him try to fix his life. I don't need him punished. I just need him gone from my life." Pride flashed in Simon's eyes.
You're remarkable, you know that? I'm learning. She snuggled into his embrace, feeling safe and valued in a way she'd never experienced before. Simon? I love you.
The words hung in the air between them, enormous and terrifying, and true. Evangeline felt Simon go still, then his arms tightened around her almost painfully. Say that again. His voice was rough, thick with emotion. I love you, she repeated, pulling back to meet his eyes. I know it's complicated and probably crazy and maybe too soon, but it's true. I love you. Simon's kiss was different this time. Deeper, more intense, carrying months of restrained desire. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. I love you too, he whispered. God, Evangeline, I love you so much it terrifies me. Good terrified or bad terrified? Both. All of it. He laughed, the sound shaky. I've spent my entire adult life building walls, keeping everyone at a distance. And then you came along and demolished every single one without even trying. Should I apologize? Don't you dare. He kissed her again, softer this time. I want this. I want you. I want whatever future we can build together. Even though I'm just a housekeeper from the South Side? You've never been just anything. And you haven't been my housekeeper for months. You're my partner, my equal, the person I trust most in the world. His hand found hers, their fingers interlacing. I want to build a life with you, Evangeline. A real life, not just this arrangement we've been dancing around. What kind of life? Simon stood, pulling her up with him. He led her to the windows where Chicago spread out below them, a city of infinite possibility. Whatever kind you want. Stay here, move somewhere new, change everything, or change nothing. I just want to do it with you. Evangeline looked out at the city that had been the backdrop for her transformation, from victim to survivor, to something stronger still, from alone to protected to loved. Simon had been the catalyst, but she'd done the work of becoming someone new. I want to stay here, in Chicago, in this apartment. I want to keep learning your business, keep building this partnership we've started. I want to wake up next to you and go to sleep knowing I'm safe. She turned to face him. I want everything, Simon. The good and the complicated and even the scary parts. The scary parts might be really scary, he warned. My world isn't always pretty. I know, but I'd rather face it with you than be safe without you. Simon pulled her close and they stood there wrapped in each other as snow continued to fall outside. Neither spoke for a long moment, content just to exist in this space they'd created together. Finally, Simon broke the silence. Move in with me. Officially. Not as my housekeeper, not as someone I'm protecting, as my partner, my girlfriend, whatever label you're comfortable with. I'm already here most of the time, Evangeline pointed out. I know, but I want it to be official. I want you to know that this is your home, not just a place you're staying because I offered it. I want you to feel like you belong here, with me. Evangeline pretended to consider it, enjoying the flicker of uncertainty in Simon's eyes. I suppose I could be convinced. What's the rent? Everything, he said, simply. All of you. Every part. Your thoughts, your opinions, your terrible taste in television shows, your habit of leaving coffee cups all over the apartment. I want it all. That's a steep price. I'm willing to pay it. His expression grew serious. I'm all in, Evangeline. Completely. Terrifyingly all in. If you are. She rose on her toes, kissing him with all the love and trust and hope she'd found in the past 3 months. I'm in. All the way. Epilogue. 1 year later, Evangeline sat in the office she'd claimed in Simon's penthouse, reviewing the books for one of his legitimate businesses. She'd taken accounting courses, learned the ins and outs of his operations, and gradually become an integral part of how he ran his empire. The illegal parts she stayed away from, a boundary they'd both agreed on. But the restaurants, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolios, those she'd learned inside and out. Simon valued her input, trusted her judgment, and treated her as a true partner in building their future. Her phone buzzed with a text from Isabella, her old neighbor from the Rosewood. "Coffee this week? Want to hear all about the fancy life?" She smiled, typing back a quick agreement. She'd stayed in touch with the few friends from her old life, wanting to remember where she'd come from even as she embraced where she was going. Simon appeared in the doorway, jacket off, tie loosened. "Working late again?" "Says the man who hasn't stopped working since 6 this morning." She stretched. "What's the occasion for coming home early? It's only 9. "Can't I want to spend time with the woman I love?" "You can, but you usually don't until at least midnight." Evangeline moved into his arms, the gesture as natural as breathing now. "Something on your mind?" Simon pulled a small box from his pocket, and Evangeline's breath caught. "I've been thinking about permanence, about making sure you know this isn't temporary, that I'm not going to wake up one day and decide I'm done." "Simon!" "Let me finish." He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. "I'm not great at pretty speeches, and I can't promise you a normal life, but I can promise you that every day, for the rest of my life, I'm going to choose you. I'm going to protect you and value you and love you with everything I have." He took her hand. "Evangeline Vega, will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision as she looked at the man who saved her life and then taught her how to truly live it. "Yes. God, yes." Simon slid the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with all the passion and tenderness that had become their language. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. "I love you," Evangeline whispered. "I love you too." Simon pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "Thank you." "For what?" "For being absent from work that day. For letting me find you. For giving me a chance to be more than what I was." His arms tightened around her. "For making me want to be better." Evangeline tilted her face up to kiss him again. "We made each other better. That's how this works." As they stood there in the office that had become hers, planning a future that once seemed impossible, Evangeline thought about the journey that had brought them here. From terror to safety, from isolation to partnership, from merely surviving to actually living. Simon Greer had just wanted to know why his maid missed work. What he'd found was a woman who would change everything. His priorities, his heart, his entire life. And what Evangeline had found was a man who saw past her circumstances to the person she could become, who gave her the safety and space to transform into someone stronger. Their story hadn't been simple or easy, but it had been real, and it had been theirs, and that was more than enough. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please share your favorite part in the comments, and let me know where in the world you're watching from. Have a wonderful day.